Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're jumping into a topic that affects, well, every single one of us, but can feel super complicated: taxation. So let's get right into it and really break down the core ideas behind why we pay taxes and what they're all about. But first, I want to start with a question for you. When you think of a nation, a whole country, what do you think is its lifeblood? The one thing that keeps it running? It's a pretty powerful idea, and honestly, it's the key to understanding everything we're about to talk about. So, what is taxation really? At its most basic level, it's the inherent power of the government to demand enforced contributions. Now, those are the key words right there: inherent and enforced. This isn't a voluntary club or subscription service. It's a fundamental power a state has just so it can exist and function. And that brings us right back to that opening question. The core concept here is called the lifeblood theory, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Just like your body needs blood to keep all your organs working, a government needs taxes to function. Without that constant, reliable flow of revenue, everything just stops. It's an absolute necessity.
Okay, so we know what taxes are. They're this inherent power to collect money. But that brings up the next obvious question: why? Why do we have this obligation in the first place? Well, there are a couple of big theories behind it. The first reason is just pure necessity. I mean, think about it. The necessity theory basically says that taxes are a burden, for sure, but they're a necessary one. Without that money, the state literally can't exist. It can't pay for national defense, it can't build roads or bridges, it can't fund schools or hospitals. At the end of the day, it's the price of admission for living in an organized society. And a second big reason is what's known as the benefits protection theory. You can just think of this as the great give and take. It's the idea that taxation is a two-way street. We, the people, pay our taxes, and in return for that contribution, we get all the benefits of a functional government. Protection, safety, law and order, all of it. And here's a perfect real-world example of that theory in action. So picture a business owner. She pays her local business taxes. What does she get for that? Well, she gets paved roads that allow customers to actually get to her shop. She gets a police force that helps protect her store from being robbed. It's not some abstract idea, it's a direct, tangible exchange.
All right, so we've covered the why. Now let's switch gears and get into the what. Let's do a little anatomy lesson. What are the specific features that make a tax a tax? So what's in the DNA of a tax? Well, there are a few key ingredients. First, it's a pecuniary burden, which is just a fancy way of saying it has to be paid in money. You can't pay your taxes in chickens. Second, it has to be for a public purpose. It can't be to make some official rich. Third, it's legislative, meaning only Congress or a similar body can create a tax. Fourth, it's territorial, so it only applies within a country's borders. And finally, it's supposed to be proportional, based on a person's ability to pay.
But out of all those characteristics, this one is probably the most important to wrap your head around. A tax is a forced contribution. It's not a choice. Your personal consent isn't required. It's an obligation, plain and simple. And here's where that lifeblood theory we talked about really gets real. Imagine this scenario. The government owes you $1 million for some work you did, but you also happen to owe $1 million in taxes. You can't just say, hey, let's call it even. It doesn't work that way. You must pay your taxes because that money is the essential lifeblood needed for the entire country to function, not just to settle one individual account. Sometimes the best way to understand what something is to get really clear on what it isn't. The government collects money in a bunch of different ways, so let's draw some clear lines here. So a state actually has three big inherent powers. There's police power, which is about regulating behavior for public safety. There's eminent domain, which is taking private property for public use. But only taxation has the primary, number one goal of raising revenue. That's its unique job. Let's make this super practical. Think about a bar. The business tax the bar pays every year, that's to raise revenue for the city. That's a tax. But the fee it pays to get its liquor license, that's different. That's a license fee, and its purpose is regulation, to cover the costs of making sure the bar is operating safely. See the difference? Revenue versus regulation. Here's another bit one. A tax is not a debt. Not like a credit card debt or a loan from a friend anyway. A debt comes from a contract you willingly enter into. A tax comes from the law, and the consequences, totally different. You can't be thrown in jail for not paying a normal debt, but you can absolutely go to jail for tax evasion. And one last comparison. Let's talk about a tax versus a special assessment. A regular tax pays for general stuff that benefits everyone. But
Let's say the government builds a brand new highway right next to your property, and because of that, your property value skyrockets. They can charge you a special assessment, which is a fee based on the direct benefit you personally receive from that public project.
Okay, so up to this point, we've pretty much been talking about taxes as a way to fund the government, to get that lifeblood flowing. But that's only half the story. It's not even the most interesting half, because taxes are also incredibly powerful tools used to shape society itself.
So, you've got step one, right? The primary purpose of a tax will always be to raise revenue, to fund the state. That's the foundation. But once that's in place, governments can get creative and use taxes for all sorts of secondary, non-revenue purposes. And this is where tax policy really becomes a tool for social engineering.
For instance, governments can use taxes to regulate our behavior. Think about high sin taxes on things like cigarettes or alcohol. The goal isn't just to make money. It's to make those things so expensive that people use them less. Or they can be used to try and reduce social inequality through progressive tax systems. And they can be used for protectionism, placing high tariffs, which are just taxes, on imported goods to help local businesses compete.
Which kind of brings us full circle and leaves us with this one final, really important question. We've established that taxes are the lifeblood that keeps a nation alive, but we've also seen that they're the rudder that can be used to steer the entire ship of state. So the question we should all probably be asking is, where exactly should they be taking us?